Welcome to everybody. Our virtual Lyme Impact session tonight is featuring Katina Makris, and we'll give a little bit of her background. We're going to really keep the introduction short. We're not going to cover some of the stuff we often do, legislation, what's going on with tick surveillance in the state of PA, other issues that are really important to the Lyme community. We're going to really just jump right into it. You have with us tonight William Moore, who is our technician guru and a board member. He runs the Pittsburgh support group region for PA Lyme. My name is 𝗟𝗆𝗃. I'm a co-founder. I also run the Harrisburg region of PA Lyme. For most of you are aware of this, I'm sure. PA Lyme is the largest 501c3 nonprofit in the state of Pennsylvania, serving the needs of Pennsylvania residents. We have 18 support groups regionally across the state, local representation. We're all volunteers, and between prevention, awareness, surveillance, some of the other areas that are important, legislation, getting medical conferences here in PA, that's really what our makeup is all about. I'm really pleased to introduce Katina Makris. This particular presentation may go a little bit longer. My sense is the Q&A is going to be very robust. So we advertised it that it'll run to probably 8:45. We'll cut it off at 8:45. For those of you that are really interested in the Q&A, by all means, please attend and stay tuned. So Katina Makris is a certified homeopath and certified spiritual healer. She's a graduate of Duke University, the Hahnemann School of Homeopathy, and the Still Point School of Integrative Life Healing. She was on the board of the Council for Homeopathic Medicine for 7 years. She has 35 years plus experience, private practice, motivational speaking, and philanthropic work. In addition to her being an international radio host of Lyme Light Radio, she's also an accredited, acclaimed author. She's award-winning. She has a recent book out of the Woods, which is her memoir of how she overcame 10 years of neurological Lyme. It's really very motivational. I encourage folks, if you haven't read it, to go to Amazon and by all means get it. What you're going to get a sense of is how she went from total health to illness, to the bed, to a wheelchair for 3 years, and then the evolution to where she is now teaching others to overcome Lyme disease. So we're really privileged, very pleased. Katina, thank you again. With much gratitude, allow me to turn it over to you.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Eric. Thank you for inviting me, and to all of your wonderful members at PA Lyme. It's really an honor. I've known of you all for many years, and thank you, Bill, for handling all the technology. Since I'm a little bit a dinosaur, my son always teases me with that. I appreciate both of you so much. So I want to just quickly preface to all of our attendees tonight what a joy it is to be with you, and that I can relate to so much of your suffering. As Eric mentioned, I'm just going to give it a quick little skim because I want to get into the nuts and bolts of helping you with what I call my four-pronged approach to overcoming Lyme disease. So I, in the summer of 2000, was stricken with what was apparently a summertime flu. Picture of health in my early 40s, lived an organic lifestyle since I was in my 20s, kind of ahead of the curve with all of holistic medicine, a homeopathic practitioner, as Eric said. And this flu was very severe, with the vertigo and the headache and the chills and the fever, etc. Cut to the chase, no one tested me for Lyme disease up in New Hampshire. That's where I live. They thought Lyme was down in Connecticut and down in the Jersey Shore and out on Long Island, and they never thought of it up in New Hampshire. And really, within a matter of weeks, I was incapacitated with everything that so many of you have suffered with splitting migraine headaches, with heart arrhythmias, digestive irritable bowel, with trembling limbs, with anxiety attacks, insomnia, and my whole life was falling away from me rapidly. I had a huge homeopathic practice. As you heard, I sat on the national board, wrote the national exam, had a health column in the newspaper for 10 years. And this was a nightmare for me. I call it a tsunami, because everything I worked for, all of those American emblems of success, right? Our career, your home, your marriage, the IRA, all of it got washed away in my misdiagnosis of Lyme disease. 17 neurologists, cardiologists, gastroenterologists, psychiatrists, hormone specialists, everybody. No one picked it up. 3 false negative Lyme tests. We all know that horror show, right? So in year 5, I'm completely bedridden and in a wheelchair, as you heard, and my marriage was lost. My little boy, who was 3 when I first got sick, was now 8. He was really the only thing I had to hold on to. And I was dying. I overheard the doctors one day when I was in a visit saying that I give her a 10% chance of survival. Not recovery, survival, because I had cardiac symptoms, pericarditis, and all of this neurological dementia, foot drop, palsies, tremors, a profound weakness, irregular heartbeats, everything. And it was a colleague of mine, believe it or not, a PhD clinical nutritionist, who I ended up in his office in desperation. And he is listening to me 20 minutes, and he always knew me as a picture of health and so high energy and completely vital. And he said to me, Katina, this is neurological Lyme disease. No one's picked it up on you. They're using the outdated test, that old ELISA test, that old fashioned Western blot. So this was in 2005, and he used 2 labs. Now, what we know as IGeneX, which was pretty new in those days, and a lab that never got FDA approval called Bowen, B-O-W-E-N. It was in Florida. And sure enough, I came back with super high positive, numerous bands, DNA strands, everything. I was never so happy and furious at the same time. Happy because we knew what was wrong with me. It wasn't fibromyalgia. It wasn't early onset dementia. It wasn't PMS or early menopause. It was Lyme disease. It was a bacteria. And I was excited. I thought, oh, good, we can kill this thing and I'm going to get better. And he said to me, it's not quite that easy. I know that you are hopeful. And he says, I am hopeful too. He says, I've had a lot of cases that I've rebuilt the systems and they've gone on to recovery. He says, I believe you're going to recover. He says, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take 2 to 3 years of treatments. And I thought he was going to put me on an IV antibiotic, but he said to me, I would think twice about that. Why don't you talk to your doctor about it? But honestly, at this point, it's so embedded in your organs and in your tissues that it's really a tissue disease and an organ disease. And the antibiotics are only going to pick up what's in your bloodstream, which is maybe like 10% of the hatch outs. So I had this rapid learning. I'm as sure as so many of you had. I had this rapid learning over the next weeks and months about the Borrelia burgdorferi and the whole spirochete mechanism of it and how it augers its way from the bloodstream into the tissues and connective tissues. And it's looking for fatty acids. That's what it loves to eat. And I'm going to get into this now. So what happened is I made a complete recovery. It took 5 years of treatment, but honestly, I would say about every 6 months, I was making some kind of strides. But when I did see my doctor, who was an integrative medicine physician, and we showed him the results, he said to me, wow, he says, I'm going to learn through you about this disease, which he did. And now he's an ILADS doc and everything. And, but when he looked at a lot of the metabolic profile testing that this PhD clinical nutritionist did, he saw so much damage that I had running throughout my body everywhere, from my immune function to the inflammation cascade, to my neurotransmitters, to my mitochondria dysregulated. He said to me, Katina, I'm going to keep you on another year of bed rest, because if we push you too hard, you're going to end up with chronic fatigue syndrome. And I couldn't believe it, because you can tell I'm an extrovert, and I'd already been locked at home for so long. And I was like, what? Another year of bed rest? You gotta be crazy. I have to be out in the world. He says, no, 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 you have to live simple and you have to live small. So it was a real wake-up call for me. I ended up framing it in my own mind's eye as my retreat. People pay money to go to an ashram or to go to a retreat. And I ended up reframing it in my mind that if I was going to get better, I had to live very simple and very small. And I wrote a book that some of you have known. Can you see Out of the Woods? This book was actually written 10 years ago. This is the second edition. I'm very proud of it. It's gone into so many printings. I think we're up at like the 7th or 8th printing now. Dr. Horowitz wrote me the foreword. He and I have taught a lot together at Omega. It's also on Audible, which was a big request of mine. For people that have neurological Lyme like me, I couldn't read or even look at the computer for 2 years. So it's on Audible at Amazon for those of you that have a hard time reading. But I take you through this whole story that I just gave you the highlights of, and we go through my downhill spiral and then my recovery journey. And it's very inspirational. And so many people tell me, oh my God, Katina, I underline it. I sleep with it. This is like my best friend. You know exactly what I've been through. And I wrote it really at the emotional level. And then there's a section at the back that has a lot of guidance. Now, the second book I wrote, this book went to awards, I'm proud. The second book I wrote, which is what we're going to actually discuss some material from this book tonight. This book is very powerful. This is the Lyme disease autoimmune illness and Lyme disease recovery guide. And this book basically breaks down my treatment protocol that this PhD used with me, and I use it constantly in my practice now. I've been well for 11 years and treating people for that whole time now. I've treated hundreds. And I get into all of the nitty gritty of what we need to do. So I'm going to give you the highlights tonight, and we can do some Q&A at the end. And just while we're on the books, this is a great inspirational one. Loving Yourself Enough to Live. It's a little skinny one. The opening chapter is my near-death experience to Lyme disease, when I did die and my heart stopped and I left my body and I was out of it on the other side, looking down and in, and then how I did come back. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm here. And then it's filled with lots of inspirational messages and little vignettes, and it's meant to just open to and give you a little bit of hope for the day. Like I'll just give you one right now. I just opened to Deep Journey. Personal transformation is a deep, soulful journey, akin to Persephone's descent into the underworld. Ultimately, if we listen within and we learn how to let go, and with the ability to find faith, trust, balance, and self-love, we can recalibrate, receive divine guidance, and grow in vastness and depth. I'm going to get into it a little bit later in tonight's talk, but I believe in recovering from these chronic conditions like Lyme disease and a lot of the autoimmune spectrum. Mending the spirit is just as important as mending the body, because my spirit did break during the Lyme nightmare. I lost hope. I lived in despair. The depression was profound. I didn't believe I would ever walk again. I didn't believe I would be able to drive a car. And all I did was pray that I could make it through the night sometimes, and be able to attend my son's poetry reading at school. And, the suffering was profound, but suffering is really a gateway in some way. It's a gateway to our healing when we learn that there's a lot on the inside that we bear, great gifts of intention and will, and a personal faith and belief in ourselves, and a lot that we can do. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to get into my four-pronged approach. So this is how I address cases, and this is what worked on me. And even if you're already in treatment with practitioners, there's several elements of what I'm going to talk about that you can carry forward that are very helpful for you. And the first thing we're going to talk about is detoxification of the large organs. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is the damages and depletions the chronic inflammation induces. The third part is killing the bugs or killing the organism. And then the last tidbit is, as I said, mending the spirit. So what I really want to address is very important, and I've left it with Eric, is I have it written out in a PDF for you. I'm going to explain it out loud to you right now, but for those of you that are visual learners, it'll be nice for you to be able to read what I'm about to teach you about organ detoxification. So think of your body, I think of it as an ecosystem, okay? It's kind of like a terrarium. And our skin is like the outside layer of the terrarium, and inside we're an ecosystem, right? We have all this tissue and fluids, and it's a happy habitat in there that's dark and moist for a lot of things to claim home to and replicate and have many generations of offspring. Borrelia, Bartonella, mycoplasmas, mold, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, candida, all these things love our little ecosystem in there. And what happens for a lot of us, especially with Borrelia, but also the co-infections, I'm just going to lump them all together tonight because we don't have time to get into each one. But the organisms, when they enter our bloodstream, okay, think about it as an injection, right? You just got an injection from the tick bite, and in came this whole influx of what I call the little miniature cesspool of the tick, everything that was in its gut that it picked up from the host prior to you that was in that bloodstream of that deer or that possum or that mouse just got injected into you. So Borrelia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, Epstein-Barr, all these organisms just got injected into you, and your body goes, uh-oh, red alert, red alert. This is a second line of defense. It didn't come in through the sinuses and the mucous membranes, which would trigger your lymph nodes and the early first line of defense. It's right in the bloodstream, so it's second line of defense. So immediately, the thymus gland right here in your chest starts producing the T fighter cells, and the little adrenal glands, they're like my little pets. I love them. They're a huge part of this illness. The adrenal glands start pumping out natural anti-inflammatories because they're going to try to corral, right, where that tick bite is, which is why sometimes you get the ring. That's the anti-inflammatory agents, the natural steroids trying to corral the organism, right, in that place. So the adrenals are pumping, the thymus is pumping, the lymph nodes get kicked into gear. And the longer this organism is in your system, it's tipping our pH to what we call acidic, okay? Acidic environments are rife for organisms to grow in. We want our pH to be up at like 6.8, 7.0. When we get below 6.5 pH, that's when organisms, molds, yeasts, all of these things run out of control because they love it in that atmosphere, and cancers grow at below 6.0. So one of the very first things we do in natural medicine is we want to get the big organs of detoxification strong and flushing. So that's the liver, right, which is under the right ribs, right? That's the liver area. Works with your bloodstream. It cleans out all the impurities, and it uses a digestive tract to send things out. Then we've also got the spleen, which is under the left ribs. That's the graveyard for all the white, dead white blood cells, those white blood cells that are trying to pick up the Borrelia and grab it, bring it into the spleen, right? And it's trying to get pushed out by sweat, right? The lymph system, the lymphatics use the pores of the body, sweat to release things. And then the third big system of detoxification are the kidneys. As you know, they have to deal with all the fluids of the body. So what we want to do is we want to get these organ systems very, very strong. Before we think about killing off the Borrelia, you want these organ systems to be flushing. So when we go for the kill, you don't back up, because the backup is the Herxheimer reaction. There's no need to have a Herxheimer reaction if the kidneys are flushing, the liver's flushing, the spleen's flushing. I barely had any Herxheimer reactions at all because I was on 6 weeks of large organ detoxification as step 1. So what I use is this wonderful kit, and I've gotten permission from Bioresources Inc. They're in California. They carry a wonderful brand of homeopathic remedies from Germany, a company called 𝗥𝗏𝗄, P-E-K-A-N-A. And this kit is like gold in my opinion. And that's, as I said, Eric's got it written down for you all. I think he's going to distribute it. I don't know if it's on the website or your Facebook page or whatnot, but I'm going to show you the little bottles and tell you how to use them. Okay, normally you only can get these from a practitioner, but I spoke with the owner of Bioresources and he was so happy that I'm educating you all that he has given permission. If you call in your order for the 𝗥𝗏𝗄 Basic Detox Kit and you use the code Katina, K-A-T-I-N-A 11, he's gonna let you get this kit. All right, you don't have to get it from your doctor. So that's a very special opportunity we have tonight for Pennsylvania Lyme. I'm really happy for all you folks. So let me show them to you and I'll show you how they work. So we've got this one here, PAT, that's for the liver. Okay, then we've got right here, whoopsies, 𝗟𝗆𝗺 in the blue, that's for the spleen. And then we've got Renilux here, this is for the kidneys. Okay, the way I do it to keep it simple, there's 2 methodologies. I'm going to teach you the basic simple methodology. There's one that's much more intricate for people that are very, very sick, but you want your practitioner for that. What you're going to do is you're going to start, I generally start everybody with the kidney one first, because the kidney is the one that is really doing a lot of fluid flushing, right? And the organism, Borrelia and company, you know, the gang of Bartonella, you know, Babesia, everything, releases endotoxins. You've probably heard that phrase before. And one of the main endotoxins, which is a byproduct they release, is ammonia. Okay, and that's what causes the brain fog. We're really not meant to have ammonia in our bloodstream, but when we do, we feel very groggy, foggy, soggy, boggy, and don't really want to move, think, lift a limb or anything. So we want to pull that ammonia out, and we also want to pull out all the other, you know, byproducts that the organisms are releasing and that your body is actually manufacturing. So kidneys, number 1. So you're going to take the Renilux, right? And you're going to get a clean glass. And every morning in your clean glass, you're going to put 2 inches of clean water that does not have chlorine or fluoride in it. And I start with just 5 drops from the little bottle here, okay? Some people can go up to 10, 15, etc. But in the very beginning, I just start with 5 drops in that 2-inch mixture, okay? Take a sip, hold it on your tongue, count to 10, and then swallow. Homeopathic remedies are best absorbed by the sublingual glands, and they go right into the bloodstream. We bypass the digestive tract. So take a sip, count to 10, take another sip, then count to 10, swallow. I take 3 sips, okay, as my first dose. Then later in the day, you're going to keep that glass, by the way. You could put a piece of paper over it or something just so that, you know, dust or whatnot doesn't fall into it. But the homeopathic remedy will not evaporate for 24 hours. It'll stay in the liquid suspension for 24 hours. So just put a piece of paper over so dust doesn't fall in. If you want, put a K or something on a piece of paper or adhesive tape or whatnot, so you know that it's your kidney drops and you don't throw it out by accident. So 3 sips in the morning, 3 sips in the afternoon, and then later again in the evening, sometimes take another 3 sips. With homeopathic remedies, because we are absorbing them with the sublingual glands, you don't want taste in your mouth. So if you just ate, drank, brushed your teeth, had a piece of chewing gum, wait 20 minutes until the flavor's gone, and then you take your dosing, okay? And then when you've taken it, same thing, wait another 15, 20 minutes till you eat or drink so it's fully absorbed. Nothing bad is going to happen, it's just not going to be effective. So you just want to be protective of that. So for 2 weeks, we do the kidney drops. Get the kidneys flushing. This little formula is got 6 homeopathic herbal plants in it. In this book, actually in Out of the Woods too, I have a section in here also on my website, KatinaMakris.com, that explains what is homeopathic medicine. I also have a YouTube video up on it at Omega Institute where I explain what is homeopathic medicine. We could always do that for another night, but thank you for trusting me tonight. It's very gentle curative art. So you're going to do your Renalux drops for 2 weeks, okay? Then on week 3 and 4, you're going to move over to the 𝗥𝗵𝗵𝗵. That's for the liver, okay? So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to get a clean glass, 2 inches of water, 5 drops every morning, and then same thing. Take those sips, 3 sips, holding, counting to 10 before you swallow each one. 2 weeks of liver support, okay? So now we're getting the liver moving. Some of you might notice that you might have a few more bowel movements or a little more fuller bowel movements because it's clearing out any junk in your liver, okay? So 2 weeks of that. So that's week 3 and 4. And then week 5 and 6, we're gonna go on to 𝗟𝘆𝗺𝗃, which is the spleen. Same thing, 2 inches of water, 5 drops. And then the same protocol, 3 sips morning, 3 sips afternoon, 3 sips night, okay? So that's going to get these big organs strong and flushing. A lot of people tell me with the spleen one, they never felt so fantastic in their life because that 𝗥𝗲𝗃𝗃𝗲𝗍, right? Because the lymphatic needs movement. We need to be walking, going upside down, like kids on the jungle gym and all of that stuff. Their lymphatic system's getting flushed readily. So a lot of people tell me, oh my God, Katina, I love the spleen drops. I've never had such a clear head in my life. So anyway, that's this nice little kit. It's super easy. If you're working with a practitioner, you can go beyond the 5 drops. You can move it up to 8, 10, 12, 15 drops. When you get to the point when you're taking either antibiotics or antimicrobial herbs or homeopathic sarcodes or using Rife machine to kill off organisms, you can make the dilutions a little bit more potent. But for starters, for prepping, we do it just as I explained. The other 2 things I love to use to help with detoxification are 2 very simple things that many of you probably have heard or used: activated charcoal and milk thistle. It's called using a binder and a pusher. Activated charcoal is a binder, okay? What it does is it acts like a sponge and it sucks up all those endotoxins and all the byproducts that the organisms are releasing. So you want to take like 2 charcoal tablets, but you don't want to take the charcoal near anything because it's going to suck up everything, right, that it's near, right? So if you just took vitamins or you just had a meal or you just took an antibiotic, that charcoal is going to suck that up. So we try to say, try to take it 2 hours away from eating and supplements and medicine. So I often tell people, just put 2 charcoal tablets by your bedside table. And when you get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, take your charcoal then, because chances are you're not eating in the middle of the night or you're not taking medicines in the middle of the night. Some of us are, but hopefully we're not. So charcoal acts as a binder, and then milk thistle is just a good old-fashioned granddaddy remedy. It's so simple. It's a wonderful plant that grows all around the world, and it really helps the liver release and purge toxins. So when people see elevated enzyme levels with their liver, like your SGT or SGP is elevated, something that happens a lot with Bartonella, milk thistle's really great at cleaning out that liver. So It's all on this little PDF that I gave you. But so that's step one in my four-pronged approach is let's get the big organs strong and healthy and flushing. Step two, okay? This is where this book is going to come in really handy for you. A lot of folks have told me, oh my God, I took this to my doctor and I said, can we please do it this way? And the doctor read the book and they got on board and people may have made wonderful recoveries. I love getting those beautiful emails from you all. So this is really important information. And I'm sorry if I'm talking too quickly, but I'm trying to get it in for you all. So this is really important. And this is why I think a lot of cases do not cure. This is why I think a lot of cases do what I call plateau. People start killing off the organisms right off the bat, right? I mean, that's a good intention, but you haven't prepared the system, maybe the way I just did with the detox organs. But when we kill organisms, that's one thing, okay? You're bringing down the load of this, you know, whole proliferation of organisms living in your ecosystem. But what we are not paying attention to is the fact that these organisms have set up, as so many of you know, internal inflammation, okay? So this inflammation process that's going on inside of your body is causing damages and erosion, okay? And I'm going to try to explain it to you in a simple way so you can understand your physiology. So as I mentioned earlier, the Borrelia in particular, what it likes to eat is essential fatty acids. That's its food. Okay, it likes sugars too. That's why we often say try to avoid sugars and carbohydrates, but what it really loves are essential fatty acids. Essential fatty acids are what give everything stretch in our body. Okay, so the fascia of your muscles, so your muscles, you know, aren't too stiff. We have a layer on the outside called fascia. The fascia has got loads of fatty acids in it to make those muscles, you know, mobile. The synovial lining in your joints, again, is loaded with essential fatty acids to keep your joints lubricated. The pericardium of your heart and all of the organs and all of the glands, they have a little casing around them, okay? And they have a tiny little layer around them. And that layer, again, it's a little protective, you know, casing around the organ, whether it's a heart or whether it's the pituitary gland or the thyroid, has a little casing around it. And that casing is loaded with fatty acids because it needs to be elastic, right? Because the organs have to shift around and move around a little bit when we move or bend or dip or turn or jump or whatnot. So the nerves too, the myelin sheaths are loaded with essential fatty acids. So when we think about Borrelia 𝗤𝗿𝗄𝗏, which as you know is a spirochete, right? It's a corkscrew. It's auguring its way from the bloodstream looking for food. And I say it's kind of just genetic Russian roulette in terms of where maybe that tick bit you, and then also where the bacteria is finding a home to nest in. And those first signs and symptoms are often where it's nesting. Like I had terrible neck pain and those vicious migraines right up off the bat. So probably, I bet you anything, I have this thick, long hair. I probably got bit on the head or the neck, didn't realize it. And it, you know, set up this chronic inflammation immediately in my neck and set off the migraine headaches. So what we want to do is we use specialty labs, okay, and they do metabolic profile analysis. And I go through it all in this book, but you've heard of some of them like Genova, Real-Time Labs, the Smoky Mountain Labs. They're all around the country. We have different ones that integrative medicine doctors use. So what they will do is they'll run profiles to assess your thyroid function, much more specific than the traditional doctor would do, because the traditional labs are looking for what we call clinical abnormalities, where your numbers are so far off and so far out of the range that you actually have pathology. But a lot of us with Lyme disease, especially in the first months and the first couple of years, were preclinical or subclinical. Like your thyroid could be off enough that you're feeling sluggish, your skin's getting dried out, your hair might be thinning, you might be gaining weight, or it might even be revved up in some cases. If the organisms are feasting on the fatty acids in your thyroid, it's enough to throw that thyroid off, right? And same thing with the joints. If you're the type that have a lot of joint pain, probably the organism is in there feasting on the lining of your synovial fluid of the joints. So when we run these metabolic profile analysis, we can find out like what organs and glands are in jeopardy. And I want to be encouraging to all of you. Our body is miraculous. It makes new blood cells and new organ cells, new glandular cells every single day, even new nerve cells. We can build new healthy cells, okay? So even though the organism has augured its way into the joints or onto the heart or onto the nerves, they can be rebuilt. So we want essential fatty acids. That's one of our big tools of rebuilding, okay? Because we want to replenish them that the organisms just ate up. So things like flaxseed oil, evening primrose oil, borage oil, the omega fish oils, which we're a little leery of now carrying a lot of mercury, but all those plant-based ones like flax and omega, borage, etc., evening primrose are fantastic sources of essential fatty acids. The other thing that you'll notice in a lot of Lyme disease cases is when we get a lot of neurological problems, a lot of cognitive issues, or things like anxiety and depression, what has happened is as the organism has gotten into the brain, it's disrupted your neurotransmitters, right? So a lot of you know of the happy neurotransmitter, which is serotonin, and then the other ones that help us relax, like GABA and dopamine, and then the ones that rev us up, that get us thinking really quickly and make us hyper alert, are epinephrine and norepinephrine. So that's why we see a lot of times with neurological Lyme, or even just a simple Lyme case, especially with children, we see anxiety, we see OCD, we see insomnia, we see, I mean, I had terrible obsessive thoughts that I couldn't stop, and terrible panic attacks and hyperventilating and everything. So you want amino acids. Amino acids are a big player in nourishing the brain chemicals, okay? So there's 16 amino acids that come from our protein sources in our food, and they convert to 32 amino acids that we need for our healthy brain function and other neurological function. So amino acids can be obtained from food, but you can also get them in powders. You've seen them all in health food stores. And some companies like Pure Encapsulations and others make them in capsules. So those are two real standard items that we look at when we see chronic Lyme cases. Right off the bat, I'm paying attention to people's amino acids, to their essential fatty acids, and then I start paying attention via signs and symptoms and back it up with these metabolic profile tests of what glands have been damaged and what organs are suffering. Okay, now here we go with another little bit of science for you. The endocrine system. This is kind of really kind of strange, but when I was 13 years old, I decided I wanted to become an endocrinologist. I'd always been loved science since I was a child, and I was always the nurturing type that would bring home the stray cat and the lost bunny and even the snake and the turtle and the kid in school that got teased. You know, I was just that type that just had a soft heart, and they'd all come home with me. My mom really got upset when the snake came in the house, though. She kind of drew the line on that one. She was okay with the turtles and the rabbits, but the snake, she was screaming. I had to throw the snake out in the yard, and it was just a garter snake. But anyway, when I was, I love science. when I became a candy striper. That dates my age, but I was a candy striper at the local hospital, and first was delivering flowers and mail. And then from there was working in the soda fountain, and then a nurse's aide, and working on the floors and helping, the nurses at different stations. And I saw a lot of juvenile arthritis back then in the 70s, which now I look back, it was probably Lyme. But when I was 13, I wanted to become an endocrinologist, which is really like, what? That's a real like out of the box thing. Well, wouldn't you know, all these decades would go by and I get Lyme disease and suffer so horrifically. My son got it too when he was 16. He went down too with bad neurological Lyme like me. We both had 𝗥𝗏𝗄 syndrome as well. But what I've learned is that the endocrine system gets totally blown out of the water by these infections. So I'm just going to mention the endocrine glands to you. And as I said in this white book of mine, the Autoimmune Illness and Lyme Recovery Guide, I go into detail about it and much more. But the endocrine system is a glandular system. Okay, the main one in our brain is the lead one, is the pituitary gland. The one in our forehead, they call the third eye, that's the pineal gland. That's the one that regulates to light and dark, to time zones, to seasons, to jet lag, to your sleep cycles. In your throat, we've got the thyroid, right, about your metabolism and body temperature. In our chest, I mentioned the thymus to you. That's one of the primary ones for immune function. And right next to it is the hypothalamus, which also is connected to immune function, but also has to do with growth rates, etc. And that's the one that gets way thrown off with 𝗥𝗏𝗄 syndrome. So thymus and hypothalamus. Then in our stomach, top of the stomach is the pancreas, which a lot of you remember for insulin production, but it also makes a lot of digestive enzymes, and it gets inflamed a lot with Lyme disease. And then we've got the adrenal glands, which I'm going to talk about now, on top of the kidneys. And then we've got the reproductive glands. Women have ovaries, men have testes. So the whole endocrine system, I equate it to a symphony, that everything needs to be coming in cue at the right time. And that pituitary gland is like the conductor. So the pituitary's got to be signaling, hey, thymus, go ahead and secrete the T fighter cells. Hey, adrenal glands, you've been pumping out a lot of cortisol and a lot of anti-inflammatory steroids. You can back it off now. Trying to give cues. And if the cues aren't signaling right, imagine a symphony. Like if the woodwinds don't come in at the right time or the strings come in at the wrong time, it doesn't sound good, right? It doesn't sound like an orchestra. It sounds like, just mayhem. So that what happens to a lot of us is our whole endocrine system gets thrown topsy-turvy. And again, it brings me back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago about subclinical or preclinical states. Does not always show up. I went to an endocrinologist because I said, I really feel like I have low blood sugar. I'm starving constantly. I'm weak as a hen. And as soon as I eat food, I'm good for about a half an hour, and then I'm starving all over again. And I'm shaking and trembling. I really felt like I had low blood sugar. And they did the whole blood sugar profile. I didn't show up with much. But when we did the metabolic profile analysis on different glands of my body, we discovered that, yeah, my pancreas was in trouble, and I had terrible burning pains at the top there of the stomach, where it attaches to the esophagus. I couldn't lie flat. It would just burn like crazy in bed at night. And I just had that raw feeling all the time. So the endocrine system needs a lot of TLC. And the good news is that they all respond beautifully to a lot of herbs, okay, and a lot of good supplements like chromium. Chromium will help the low blood sugar and the pancreas, okay? And the pituitary, which I talked about, responds very well to the amino acids. And now I'm going to mention the adrenal glands, which I touched upon a little bit earlier. The adrenal glands are the first to kind of tip off kilter with these tick-borne diseases, because remember I mentioned how we get injected with this little cesspool of what the prior host was carrying before you, and your body's like, red alert, there's organisms in the bloodstream, corral them. So the adrenals are sending out all of these natural anti-inflammatory steroids that we make to try to corral the organisms in one place, but they can't keep up with it for months. They kind of really wither and fatigue in a matter of probably about 6 weeks in most of us, some of us even earlier if we have a lot of stress. And the adrenal glands are fantastic, really. They do so much. Even though they're the size of a lima bean, they secrete histamines for allergies. They secrete adrenaline for fight or flight. They secrete the anti-inflammatory agents. They secrete some of the sex hormones, and they secrete cortisol, which some of you know that's about our energy production. And cortisol is supposed to relate to daylight and darkness. And again, that's going to now, you can see now how adrenals are going to relate to the pineal gland. Remember I said the pineal gland in the forehead relates to time zones, time of year, seasons, night and day, jet lag. So if your adrenals are being pushed so hard with this rapid exploding infection inside, and they're pumping out the anti-inflammatories, they're also going to start pumping out cortisol, which is a stress reactor. And when we overproduce the cortisol, it's going to mess up the pineal gland, because it's not going to have the proper cue, because the pineal is supposed to relate to, oh, daylight's coming. It's time to signal the adrenals to release cortisol. And then when darkness comes in the evening, the pineal gland is supposed to cue the adrenals to slow down the cortisol production, so you get sleepy and tired in the dark, and it's time for bed. Well, what happens with a lot of chronic Lyme cases is that this aggressive action that the adrenal glands had to take right up front early on is that they start to fatigue. We call it adrenal fatigue or adrenal collapse when it's really bad. And your pineal now is off. So now your sleep cycles are off. So there's a lot of Lyme patients who are up at 2 a.m., bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, can't go to sleep because your pineal gland's not cued in properly. So one of the very first things I do with folks is, after we use our detox kit, right, that I got you going on, put you on your essential fatty acids, get you on amino acids, is we go on good adrenal support. And there's fabulous formulas out there. A lot of great companies make beautiful products for adrenals. You know of things like ashwagandha, Rehmannia, eleuthera, ginseng for men. All of these things nourish. Vitamin C, magnesium, they all nourish. Even copper, trace mineral copper, nourishes your adrenal glands. So adrenal support is very important, okay? It's very important. And the other thing that's very important that I want to mention, we could go on and on and on throughout the whole body, is that as these adrenal glands have been pumping away and they get so fatigued, and you've got chronic inflammation going on inside of your body, right? Now your body can't even make enough steroids to keep the inflammation down, and you feel pain. Like some people have fibromyalgia pain because of the fascia of the muscle, or you've got pain in the joints, or you've got pain like I did in the nerve, and that trigeminal nerve that went up the side of my head for the migraines. When you have this inflammation, there's been erosion going on in these areas, and we need to really rebuild all of that. But one of the other big things that happens, why so many of us get so fatigued, besides that ammonia overload that I told you about right up front, that boggy, soggy, foggy, the other big reason, two big reasons we feel so exhausted is the adrenal collapse, right? So we're not making the cortisol at the right time of day, right time of night. The other big player, this turned my life around, mitochondria function, okay? And some of us have a predisposition for our mitochondria to dysregulate. Now, here we go into another little science tidbit. Okay, I know I'm overloading you, but all right, we're going back to biology class. Mitochondria are in every cell of the body. They run the Krebs cycle. Okay, I'm going to remind you about this. The Krebs cycle. What happens is we eat our food. Our digestive enzymes help us break down our food, right? Whether it's fish or broccoli or an apple. And our digestive enzymes are breaking down this food, right? And the goal is to convert it into blood sugar, which is glucose, right? And glucose is used by the mitochondria, right? The glucose runs the Krebs cycle, and the Krebs cycle converts the glucose into ATP fuel. That's what gives us our energy. So what happens with this chronic proliferation of the organisms, creating this chronic inflammation, and the adrenal glands trying to address the inflammation, they fatigue, right? And then, as I told you, the whole daisy chain of the endocrine system, none of the glands are getting their cues, right, to produce their hormones at the right time. So the symphony is completely dysregulated in all of us, and your mitochondria dysregulate, and they don't run the Krebs cycle. So you don't make fuel. And so we are lying there exhausted on the sofa and can't barely lift an arm. I couldn't wash my hair. I would have to have someone help me, carry me under my armpits to the shower, hang on to the shower bar, and then someone would wash my hair for me. It was horrible. I couldn't do a thing. It was exhausting. So when I got on mitochondria ATP, Pure Encapsulations makes it. I love their product. And Emerson Labs has one. But when I got on that mitochondria ATP supplement, holy cow, I couldn't even take a full capsule. It gave me so much energy that I was like this Everybody bunny ready to bounce off the sofa and like too alert. In the very beginning, I'd have to open up the capsule and just take like a quarter or a third. To this day, what, 15 years later, 16 years later, I still take one mitochondria ATP every day. I swear by it. And when I've been out on the road teaching, some of you have met me along the way, teaching with my books and at support groups. Sometimes I'll take an extra mitochondria later in the afternoon, but don't take it after 4 o'clock unless you want to stay up till midnight. So these are some of the things we're looking at. We're looking at, okay, our 4-pronged approach. Big organs of detoxification, we want to support them. We're looking at the damages and depletions the organisms induced by chronic inflammation. I just highlighted the endocrine system for you and the mitochondria. There's lots of other areas of the body, as you can imagine, that get jeopardized. The nerves, the heart, the mucosal lining. Some people get an irritable bowel. I had terrible irritable bowel and had to go on a heavy duty probiotic and fermented food reproliferation, Crohn's disease, interstitial cystitis. Those are all examples of where the inflammation can persist. And if you end up in Western medicine, you might get put on medication that mollifies the symptoms, but it's not necessarily curative. So you want to get to an integrative medicine doctor or a naturopath or a clinical nutritionist, or in my case, I'm a homeopath with extra training to rebuild the damages and depletions. And that's why I say these cases plateau. If there's anything I can tell you, this is the most important ingredient that's overlooked by the traditional Lyme doc, even the ILADS docs. There's many fabulous ones out there, and I love them, love them, love them. And I've taught with wonderful physicians, and I've had many of them on Lyme Light Radio with me. You want to rebuild damages and depletions, okay? And then third part of the prongs is the killing off of the organisms. Now, I'm not going to belabor it with the antibiotics because I'm sure a lot of you already know that we have a huge arsenal. The whole tetracycline family, as you know, is the #1 agent for Borrelia. We've got the anti-malarials for the 𝗣𝗿𝗍𝗃 and some of the antiparasitics for the Bartonella. And, you know, there's a lot of different antibiotics that can be used, or antiparasitic drugs, etc. It's been in the news lately with COVID-19. A lot of you have seen the use of ivermectin, which we also use with Bartonella. It's got an antiparasitic, antiviral component to it. So there's a lot of information, as I said, in this white book of mine and Out of the Woods, both of them talk about the antibiotic protocols that doctors use, whether they're oral or IV. And as you know, in an early case, you need a minimum of 4 to 6 weeks, because the Borrelia reproduction cycle to make a whole new generation of Borrelia is 6 weeks. Okay, a strep or Staphylococcus infection, in 48 hours, a new generation's made. So that's why when children have strep throat and they're on amoxicillin, within 2 days, they feel great, because you're killing off that organism pretty quickly. It's a much shorter reproduction cycle. But with Borrelia, it's a slow reproducer. It takes 6 weeks to make a new generation. So that's why with those early brand new infections, we're not too keen on the idea of just taking a week of amoxicillin or tetracycline or any of them. We really prefer you to be on a month or 6 weeks of it to kill it before it has a chance to make a new generation. So a case like mine that was 5 years old by the time I got diagnosed, if I did the antibiotic therapy, it would have been probably a couple of years of therapy to get all those generations as they hatch out, as they come out of the larva state and hatch out, right? And give you a whole new round of symptoms. So what we elected to do with me is to use Dr. Cowden's herbs. And a lot of you probably know them. The main lead one is cat's claw, which has an 85% success rate in killing Borrelia. His product is called Cemento. I love it. It has very few side effects. You can get the liquid and use just 1 drop even. Sometimes I've had people put it in their belly button. They're so sensitive. So Dr. Cowden's herbs are fantastic. Dr. Stephen Buhner's herbs are fantastic. Byron White, I think some of you know about his homeopathic drops for the different organisms, for the Bartonella, the 𝗣𝗿𝗍𝗃, etc. I go through them in my books, how you use them. The herbal protocols are very successful with people. The thing that you need to remember, though, is it's a long, slow ascent with them. This is not a quick turnaround of 2 months. This is 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. In my case, it was 5 years that I was on cat's claw. And then, you know, on and off other things like Japanese knotweed, teasel root, Hutiana, Pinellia, the different herbs that we used. As I said, I go through them in my book in detail for you, but, you know, don't give up. I want to say that if you do end up using herbal protocols, they can be very successful. Their side effects are less. I had a hard time with artemisinin, which some of you use, have used for Bartonella. Really hurt my stomach a lot. I had a lot of acidic burning pains with it. So we have to offset that with some other nutritive supplements and digestive enzymes. But you can do very well on the herbal protocols. And then the other thing I want to mention, little out of the box, but it did help me, is the Rife technology, R-I-F-E. When I was on the way to recovery, I was about 2 years in. We'd been on the detox. We'd been on all the organ and glandular rebuilding. I was about 2 years in on Dr. Cowden's herbs. I was about 50–60% better at the 2-year mark. I had started walking again. I learned to walk again at the beginning of year 2. I was able to master a mile in about 6 weeks, which felt huge. I've always been very athletic, and then I was able to start swimming again. At first, it was just floating on the kids' noodle and kicking my legs around. And then it was this gentle little breaststroke. And now you'd be really proud of me. I swim a mile every day in open water when I can, to keep my cardiovascular system strong and my immune function. So exercise is very important for the lymphatic system and for a lot of our organ function. But at about year 2, as I said, I was walking and I was back in the water a little bit. I was better, but I did not have great stamina. And I kept on thinking, what could I do? What could I do? What next? What next? What could I do? And I remembered when I was an early new homeopath in the early 80s, mid 80s, I remembered this energetic frequency medicine, Rife technology, that people were going to Canada for cancer treatments. And I thought, what about that Rife machine that people would go to Canada for? I wonder if it's effective with Lyme. So remember I said I hadn't been on the computer in years? So one day I finally got on the computer and I just Googled Lyme disease, Rife technology, and all of this stuff came up. And I saw all of these conferences in Japan, Canada, Europe. And then I found a great website by Brian Rosner called limebook.com. And I got on his website and he had great books there, and he had audio, and he had CDs and everything. And I started reading about it, and sure enough, it was considered effective for Lyme disease treatments. And I happened to have a visit coming up with my nutritionist, the one that was my lead practitioner that was overseeing my case, backed up with my MD. I was also going to acupuncture too, I have to say. And I was using homeopathy and cranial sacral therapy and Reiki therapy, whatever I could get to quiet my nervous system. Anyway, I was in the clinical nutritionist and I said to him, Jeff, what do you think about Rife technology and Lyme? He goes, it's good stuff. I said, it is? I said, it's not FDA approved. He goes, yeah, I know. He says, and they mentioned a doctor that I knew in the state of New Hampshire. And he says, do you remember Dr. So-and-so? I go, yeah. I go, what happened to him? I haven't heard his name in a while. He said, well, they said he retired, but he actually had Lyme disease. And he went to the West Coast, to California, to recuperate. And he credits the Rife machine as his big turnaround. So I have chapters devoted to it in my book. And as I said, go to limebook.com, Brian Rosner, also a friend of mine, Dane Boggs. He wrote a great book, Reiki and Rife. He explains about it. He recovered from Lyme using the Rife machine. I'll just quickly mention it because I want to get into the spiritual and then take your questions. Just very quickly, Dr. Royal Raymond Rife, great name. I hope they make a movie on this one day. He was a researching doctor in San Diego at what we now call the Scripps Institute. So back in the late 20s, early 30s, he had a microscope he developed that was 50 times more powerful than the microscopes of the day. And he was able to see under the lens organisms that they'd never seen before. And he was super excited. Imagine a researching doctor that got to see typhus, and he got to see tuberculosis, and he got to see herpes, and he got to see all of these malaria and everything that they had not visually seen. And so he was super excited about it. And as he's studying them in their little petri dishes, he starts to notice that, I'm just going to make this very basic, that imagine this, he sees the typhus organisms on his microscope in the petri dish, and they're vibrating in a particular pattern like this, let's say. And then he looks at the tuberculosis ones, and they're doing like this kind of vibration. And then he looks at the malaria ones, and they're doing like, I'm exaggerating this. He's noticing that each of these particular organisms has a particular vibrational pattern, and that they're all, all alike. So he thought, I wonder if I can replicate these. He called them oscillating vibrational footprints. I wonder if I can replicate these. So he did. He used electromagnetic energy, and he started replicating the typhus one, and the tuberculosis, and the herpes, and the cancers. And so he started replicating them. And then he decided, I wonder what would happen if I inverted the frequency and I beamed it on the petri dish of the typhus or the malaria. Well, would you know, the things electrocuted, they exploded by the inversion, by the frequency that they vibrated at. He inverted it, beamed it on them, and they electrocuted. There's a picture on the internet, 1933, Pasadena, California, of the California AMA. They're all sitting there at a banquet in their black tie and tuxedos, and Dr. Rife is right in the middle, and they are lauding him with his new medicine, his frequency energy medicine. They're lauding him with the end of all disease with his frequency technology. And big honor, big award. They're all excited about it. This whole new, this is 1933, advent of frequency medicine to treat illnesses. He had 100% success rate with cancers. A doctor from France was replicating it. A doctor in Montreal, Dr. Gunnar, was replicating it. They were super excited about the cancers in particular. And a week later, Dr. Johnson, who was the head of the California AMA, was about to give a public address to announce Dr. Rife's frequency medicine, and he had a heart attack the night before his public address, and it never got announced. And now the mystery starts, and we don't really know what quite to believe because there's not enough information. But Dr. Rife left the country, went to Tijuana, Mexico. His sister company, Burnett Labs, burned to the ground a week later. And other associate doctors that had Rife machines, which were pretty big. They were like the size, half the size of a room in those days. They started dismantling their machines pretty fast. If you think about it, penicillin was brand new, and so was cortisone was brand new. It was the beginning of the FDA and pharmacology. So there was probably, in my estimation, right up front, some threats about the frequency medicine versus the pharmacology. And that's probably why Dr. Rife disappeared to Tijuana, where he spent the rest of his life. We have to thank Dr. Gunnar up in Montreal because he had the blueprints to the Rife machine and he kept it alive. And that's why those people I knew back in the 1980s, they were going to Canada using the Rife machine that Dr. Gunnar had the blueprints on. So here we are, fast forwarding to me, 2007, my nutritionist finds me a loaner model and I borrow it from a colleague of his, a chiropractor that had one, and they're small now. They're, you know, small, and they have a keypad on them, and they come with books, manuals, and they've got all the frequency codes in there for everything: herpes, hemorrhoids, dental cavities, slip discs, you know, you name it, you go through there, sinusitis, it just goes on and on and on. And then there's a whole section on organisms. So I went on, I followed it. It said, first I did do the 2 weeks of the detox. Then I went on 4 minutes a day only for the Lyme code. And about 2 weeks in, I start to feel pretty good. Like my energy's really picked up. My head's super clear. I even went to the grocery store, which was like Mount Everest for me. And I bumped into a girlfriend there and she's like, oh, Katina, you look great. There's so much light back in your eyes. My gosh, are you feeling better? I go, I am. And she says, what are you doing? I said, I was afraid to say because it's not FDA approved. And I said, I'm trying a new protocol. And so after the 6 weeks, I had to return my loaner machine, which I did. And I was feeling so much better. I was walking several miles and cooking and, you know, all kinds of things. And about 2 weeks after we returned the loaner, my energy starts to nosedive again. And I felt horrible, and the aches and the pains and the headaches and the everything. And anyway, I mentioned it to my father, and God bless him. He was still alive. I miss him dearly, but he helped me buy a used Rife machine, and it was a big player in my recovery. I used it for several years. So it's not for everybody. It's not a good therapy to start out with. Most of the people that use Rife technology, as I said, go to Brian Rosner's site, limebook.com, read some of the books, get some of the manuals. They suggest it as a secondary approach after you've used the herbals or you've used antibiotics, and you've prepped the body like I just did with the detox and the organ support. Then the Rife technology comes into play. But a lot of folks that use it up front, it sometimes can cause such rapid die-off that the Herxheimer is extreme. I'm going to mention something about 𝗥𝗄𝗃. But so that's my tidbits for you on killing bugs. We have the antibiotic protocols, we have the herbals, and we have the Rife technology. In homeopathy, I have a specialty discipline. We call them sarcodes. They're actually the organism in homeopathic dilution. So we have Bartonella, we have Babesia, we have Borrelia, and homeopathic dilutions. It's too complicated to explain to you right now in our short hour together tonight, hour and a half tonight, but I can do another module on it sometimes if you want to learn about it, or it's in my books too. So there's different tools we have, and I myself use the herbal and the Rife, really worked for me, in the homeopathic sarcodes. I use them a lot in my practice, very successful. And then I do want to mention about the 𝗥𝗄𝗃, and then we're going to get back to the spiritual side, the last of the 4 prongs, is that if you are noticing when you're killing bugs, if you are feeling really crummy, like, you know, that die-off of the organisms, the 𝗥𝗄𝗃 reaction, you don't need to feel that miserable. What I do with cases like that is I up your charcoal and I up your milk thistle to bind and pull out. And very important is you double up on the kidney drops. Remember the Renalux in our little kit? If you're struggling with 𝗥𝗄𝗃 reaction from organism die-off, is that instead of using the Renalux drops just 3 times a day, you can use them 5 or 6 times a day even, and that just flushes and helps get rid of those dead organisms rapidly. And then I also sometimes suggest adding in a couple of doses of the spleen too, because that's going to help pull out all the dead white blood cells that are hanging out in the spleen. So that's our discussion on the first 3 prongs of detox, rebuilding damages and depletions, killing bugs. And then the last piece I want to talk about, and I'm going to do a little exercise with you, oopsies, is the emotional and spiritual suffering that accompanies this illness. I can't think of a more difficult time in my life than when I went through this Lyme passage. Like I read to you in that little quote of mine, it really is a journey into the underworld. It is like Persephone when she left the land of light and she went into Hades. The Lyme journey is extraordinarily demanding. It is the biggest test I ever went through. The word tenacious is not even big enough. It's frightening. The emotions that we feel from this illness are overwhelming. I can relate to every single one of the emotions you've felt, from fear, confusion, anger, frustration, betrayal, grief, abandonment. You lose a lot of friends, you lose a lot of connections. A lot of us are in isolation. We're withdrawn from society. We lose our jobs. In my case, my marriage broke. It's decimating. It's harrowing. It's extremely lonely. I understand why the suicide rates are so high with this illness. I myself had suicidal feelings. I could not kill myself because I had a little boy, but I understand those feelings. They're very real. The organism is messing around with your brain chemistry, as we talked about. It's a dark organism. It's got a lot of negativity associated with it, and you doubt your own self. You question everything. We live in a lot of fear of wondering if I'll ever get better, if I could ever do anything again that I loved before, that I dream about. And it's very hard. I mean, when you lose everything that you love and that you care about, and if some of you don't have a caregiver with you, it's very ominous. And the best blessing is love, right? And the best blessing is care and tenderness. And we don't always have it. And we want it. And when you find a good practitioner who happens to understand you and can listen to you, or a counselor that can support you, but a lot of psychotherapists, they don't understand Lyme disease, and they try to get into all this analysis and everything, and it's really not about that. It's you coping with what you're facing day by day, footstep by footstep, trying to get a meal, trying to get a shower, trying to get groceries, trying to get laundry done. If you've got children in the house, you know, I didn't want to neglect my son. I just would lie in the bed with him and do his homework with him side by side, or we'd lie on the sofa together and play backgammon and play Go Fish. I mean, I spent so much time horizontal on the living room floor. I relate to all of these feelings that you have. And that's where I realized when my spirit broke that I needed to do something for my own self, because no one was able to mend me but me at that level. And I had the good graces of finding a spiritual healer that I'd met years earlier, Dr. Meredith Young Sowers. She had written a book I'd read years ago called 𝗥𝗲𝗰𝗿, Journey to the Stars. And she wrote another wonderful book called Wisdom Bowls. And I ended up finding her fortuitously again, and I went to one of her weekend retreats. And it was pivotal for me because she brought us into meditation, and she taught us how to use our third eye and to journey inside ourselves and to tap into the heart center, and how to find emotions that were trapped in different areas, and how to use different exercises, whether it was intention or journaling, or using my will, setting my willpower and engagement, using my vision to see my tomorrow, to imagine and see myself. I would imagine myself in the way that I wanted to be in my new tomorrow. I wanted to see myself standing strong like a beautiful copper beech tree, and to be radiant and proud and energetic and glowing. And every day I would see myself, I close my eyes and imagine myself there. And, you know, there's something to be said about the power of belief. Bruce Lipton wrote a very famous book called 𝗣𝗿𝗍 of Belief, about how we learn to use our brain in a positive way, and to set positive intentions and positive visions and write down positive statements and recite them to ourselves. I mean, it sounds like, you know, second grade, but sometimes we have to go back to this level to reboot, because the Lyme organisms and the suffering we've gone through and the emotions that we've been burdened with pull us off of that positive self-belief and our positive self-image. So I've devoted a lot of my life and a lot of my work when I do workshops. I do breakouts, and we spend time together, and I teach you how to journey within and how to work with these inner tools that we're born with vision, with intention, with belief, with gratitude, with mindfulness, with creativity, with finding balance, not overdoing, but learning how to be with ourselves. Positive self-affirmations that I just mentioned. These are all within us. And gratitude, we just forget. You know, we're so busy. Our society is Western society. It's about achieving, acquiring, amassing. A lot of this is good. It gives us security. It gives us protection. It gives us skills and knowledge. But we also have to have our wellspring on the inside of all of the inner tools that I just mentioned, you know, of trust, of faith, of creativity, of positive intentions. So if you don't mind, if you want to join me right now, I'm going to do a little guided imagery session with you. It's only going to take us a couple of minutes, but I want to teach you how to tune into your heart center, and it's something that you can do for your own very self every day, several times a day. It was very, very instrumental in my healing. So let's just practice this together. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. Just be cool and hang out with us. But for those of you that want to try, what we're going to do, I'm going to tell you out loud, and then we're going to do it together. I'm going to have you close your eyes. We're going to take a few deep breaths, nice and slow, 4 nice, steady, slow, deep breaths all the way down into our deep lungs, into our belly. And then I'm going to have you put your hands over your heart. I'm going to guide you through. You're going to hear my words, and we're going to touch into our heart center. And then I'm going to ask you a question. And what you're going to do is you're just going to receive whatever comes to you from your intuition, whether it's a word, an image, a sound, a color, a flashback, anything. Don't judge it, just accept the right hemisphere of your brain, the intuitive side, the sensory side. We're working with that lobe of the brain right now with this guided imagery, okay? And then I'll show you what we do with that. I'll use my own self as the guinea pig, okay? So here we go. For those of you who are interested, let's close your eyes and let's just get still, get in a comfortable position. Now let's just put our hands over our heart and just start breathing nice and slowly. 4 long, steady, deep breaths in through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Okay, now I want you to take the attention of your mind's eye, and bring it down under your hands to your heart. And I want you to say thank you to your heart. Thank you, beautiful heart, for beating every day and all night long, for keeping me alive, for helping me love, for helping me care, for helping me have compassion. Thank you, heart. Without you, I could not be alive. I could not love or share without you. Thank you. And now that you're connected with your heart, we're going to ask a question, and you're just going to receive whatever comes to you. And you just trust your heart, as it's very wise and it knows so much. What do I need to embrace for my full healing? What do I need to embrace or accept for my full healing? And when you find something, you can either jot it down or keep a mental note of it. But I'm going to use myself as a guinea pig, because then I want to take your questions. But the word that came to me when I asked my own self is, I heard the word pacing, that I need to pace myself, not go too fast or not go too slow. So what I would do is I would make a positive statement about that. So what you could do is I would say, for full healing, I will pace myself. Pacing. So whatever you've got, if you got rest, then you said, I will rest to embrace my full healing. If you saw color, what does that color mean to you? Is it a vibrant color like orange or red, which, might have some kind of emotion or feeling to you? Or maybe it means you're supposed to wear it or have it around your house, like get a red pillow, get new pillowcases or something. So we can explore all of this a lot more, but just know you don't have to ask yourself the question. You can just do that little exercise I taught you with the breathing and touch into your heart center and thank your heart every day for beating and for being so faithful and keeping you alive, because this is going to help regulate the immune system, because the heart and the thymus gland are right there together. So we want to keep that center. That's our fourth energy chakra. We want to keep it strong. Okay, I talked a whole lot. Let's get some questions.
Why, thank you very much. Let's, anybody that has questions out there, please use the Q&A feature if you're in Zoom, or if you're on Facebook, leave a comment. And I apologize ahead of time. Sometimes I miss the comments on Facebook, but I'll do my best. But if you have a question, leave a comment there or use the Q&A from Zoom. I know we had a couple on Facebook already. They wanted you to repeat the books that you wrote. Maybe you could do that at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have the first one I wrote, which was my memoir, Out of the Woods, Healing Lyme Disease, Body, Mind, and Spirit. Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
That's in Audible too. Like I said, all of them are in a soft paperback, and they're also in digital. And then this is the manual on how to recover autoimmune illness and Lyme disease recovery guide, mending body, mind, and spirit. This is not on Audible. I wish it was, but maybe one day I can read it so this is excellent. Autoimmune illness and Lyme disease recovery guide. And then the one of inspirational messages, which is really quite lovely, loving yourself enough to live. And this has got my near-death story in the beginning, and then it's got those nice quotes. And then my fourth book, which we're just introducing now, is a journal, Loving Yourself Enough to Thrive. And we've got 10 writing prompts in there that you can journal with. So that's a wonderful new, I'm going to be doing probably an online workshop with that one. So do we have any other questions floating around?
We have questions starting to roll in, yes. I have a question here about the full moon. What is your opinion of Lyme patients who get slammed during full moon periods?
Yeah, it's very common. It's the parasites. The parasites and the Lyme bacteria, actually, they hatch out. They hatch out during the lunar cycles. So we see aggravations and flare-ups during the full moon predominantly, sometimes a new moon, but definitely with a full moon. So what I usually suggest is up your adrenal support at that time, and also use your detox kit, that little detox kit I have. I would particularly go on the liver and the kidney during the full moon to pull out those organisms. But you're not imagining it. You're not imagining it.
Okay, happy to hear that. Do you treat patients virtually, and are you accepting new patients?
I do treat people virtually from all over the world. Yes. And I am accepting new patients. However, we have about a 6 to 8 week wait list, but you can contact me. My email is my full name, Katina, Katina Makris, Makris, 32 @gmail.com. You could also go to my website, which is katinamakris.com, and there'll be actually a little form there you can fill in for new patients. Yes, I'm more than happy to help.
Somebody wants to know, they said they've done a lot of the things that you've talked about, but they still have a chronic headache going on 13 years. Do you have any suggestion for that?
I hate headaches. That was one of my worst symptoms too. There's a lot of things we'd have to look at. It's hard to just say across the board. The B vitamins, magnesium, are very much at play with headaches. Also, if there's nerve damage, like I had nerve damage to that trigeminal nerve, that runs up the side of your neck and then it branches out across your head. I had nerve damage, and it took me about 5-6 years actually to get that nerve to quiet down. We used homeopathic remedies for that. And We used, yeah, I use mostly homeopathic remedies to get that nerve to quiet down. But yeah, nerve damage, B vitamins, magnesium, and also if you have a misalignment in your neck, you know, and also the cerebral spinal fluid, like that's what cranial sacral therapy is about. Like there's a lot of components to headaches. So I'd have to, you know what I mean, speak to the person individually. But
Right,
I'm sorry, I have headaches. I'm sorry to hear that.
Somebody wants you to repeat the name of the kit, the detox kit that you talked about.
Sure. Yep, it's called 𝗥𝗲𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 𝗥𝗲𝗰𝗃𝗲𝗃𝗲𝗿𝘆, PEKANA, Basic Detoxification and Drainage Kit. And the company is called 𝗣𝗿𝗆𝗄𝗄𝗃, INC. And Eric, I think we've got a handout about this, don't we?
We will be putting on our website, palyme.org, we'll be putting your 4-step protocol. So we do have a handout. It'll probably be going on our website in a day or two, so do look for it.
Okay, great. And when you call Bioresources Inc., don't forget, because they really don't sell to the general public, they gave us special permission to Pennsylvania Lyme, which I was very honored and touched over. Make sure you say Katina 11, that you attended the session tonight, and they will let you purchase the kit. And it's not too expensive, which is great. And the phone number is on the handout, so it'll all be there, and the how-to is on the handout.
Okay. And we can't get through a webinar without this question. What is your opinion of the COVID vaccine for Lyme patients?
Oh, I know, right? That's true. It's a very important question. It's just really like, well, I don't have the vaccine, if that gives us some answer. I've been watching my patients. I have to say that I've treated about 50 or 60 of my Lyme patients that went ahead and got the vaccine. And I use a homeopathic remedy. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. I'll be generous with this. There's a homeopathic remedy we use. We've used it for 100 years, actually, to offset side effects in the vaccine. It protects the nervous system. And it's a remedy. They all go by their Latin names. It's a remedy called 𝗟𝗆𝗄𝗃, THUJA. And homeopathic remedies come in those little blue vials or purple vials you see in the health food store, and they have them at Whole Foods Market. And so what I have done with all of my patients, and they've all come through the vaccine very well, only one had complications, is you take a dose of this 𝗟𝗆𝗄𝗃, which is 2 pellets under the tongue, before your vaccine. So about an hour before the vaccine, 2 pellets under the tongue. And then 4 hours after the vaccine, you take another 2 pellets under the tongue. And that should prevent any vaccine reactions. And so far, all of my patients, as I've said, only one had complications. And I've had other people that have all kinds of things like diabetes and, you know, all kinds of autoimmune disorders, et cetera. And they've done very well with the Pfizer in particular. The Moderna, I'm seeing a lot of side effects with. My Lyme doc, he prefers the Johnson & Johnson. The reason being, and this is, I'll just tell you, is that the Johnson & Johnson is actually another coronavirus. Okay, so they actually took a similar, you know, the coronaviruses are all these, you know, cold and flu viruses. So they took another coronavirus and they just changed a genome on it. So the Johnson & Johnson genome is a little more similar to the COVID-19. So my Lyme doc felt that the Johnson & Johnson was more akin to a traditional vaccine, which is they usually take a dead cells, right? They take the dead, you know, polio, or they take the dead tetanus, right? So this Johnson & Johnson, he felt, was a little bit more similar to a traditional vaccine, which we know a lot of us tolerate. Now, I don't feel frightened anymore about the Pfizer, and I think that's the one I'm going to be getting, because what they've done is they've just taken, a lot of people are confused, they've just taken a section of the RNA of the DNA. So remember the DNA, if you remember from biology, it's a double helix. I can't really mimic it with my hands, but you remember it's a double helix strand, and one side of that strand has the DNA code, and then the other side of the strand has the replicating side of the code, right? So what they've done with Pfizer and Moderna is they've just taken one section of that RNA strand and they've made a vaccine out of that section. So you're not getting the whole DNA strand. Okay, so you don't have to feel like, oh my God, I'm getting the DNA from the COVID in my system. You're not. You're just getting, it's actually pretty clever what they've done, I have to say. They've taken a section of it and they've introduced it to your system so that it's triggering your immune system to say, hey, what's this in here? Let's make antibodies to it. And so it's a new technology. And that's why I waited to see how it was going to work. I hate to say this, but I waited to watch on everyone else. And as I said, of my about 50, 60 patients that I've watched, no one's had adverse effects from Pfizer, a very, very few side effects from from Johnson & Johnson, but I've seen a lot of effects off of Moderna. But the 𝗟𝗺𝗃 will protect your nervous system. I use it all the time with children with childhood vaccines to prevent learning disabilities and all of that. So we're a little, vulnerable in the Lyme disease world, but the COVID's not going to go away. You know what I mean? It's going to keep mutating and it's going to come around every winter and it's going to be with us. So you're going to have to make choices. Do you want to double mask and be at home in the winter and try to isolate and keep your immune system beefed up, which is an option, or do you want to go ahead with the vaccine? So, you have to sort of weigh it out and talk it through, but I lean towards Pfizer of the three right now.
Great answer. Thank you. Someone is asking about which Rife machine did you use? Did you use the MOPA Rife machine?
I used one that sadly they put him in jail. It was called the Global Wellness Machine. Then it was called the Detox Box. The one that it's most similar to is the 𝗔𝗽𝗽𝗿 with the MOPA. It's very similar to that. It's just was a 15-year older machine. So yes, it's similar to that. The Doug coil is another one out there, but I think it's a little too strong for most Lyme patients.
And a follow-up question is, where do you get the instructions for how to use it? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, a lot of them come with manuals, which is awesome. Mine came with a manual, which was great. My distributor that I've referred to for many years for the GB4000, Dane Boggs, Boggs, he is on Facebook. If people want to find Dane Boggs, he does trainings. Like when you get your machine, he actually sets up consultation times with you and he does training sessions with you, which I think is fantastic. The other idea is to go through Brian Rosner at limebook.com, and he too has a lot of training instructions for the Rife machine. So both those are two great resources.
Okay, let's see. Please say again the name of the mitochondria support herbal.
Oh yeah, the one I like that I take is by Pure Encapsulations, and it's called Mitochondria ATP, Alpha Tango Peter. And you can find that, believe it or not, on Amazon.
Okay. Okay, we have a couple more questions and we're coming up on 8:45. So we'll be wrapping it up here momentarily. Any suggestion for menopause support?
Oh gosh, yes, there's a lot. A lot, yeah. I went through that too with the Lyme disease and packed on like 35 pounds. It felt like a whale, and I was just horribly sweating constantly. Bioidentical hormone replacement therapy is not to be dismissed. That's the bioidenticals are made from the wild gam, emu oil, and they contain natural estrogens and natural progesterone. You need to go to a women's specialist, an integrative specialist that will, usually they run, the best way to do it is to run the 24-hour urine collection test, where you have to be home the whole day, but you collect your urine the whole day, and then it gets in this jar and it gets shaken up and it goes into the lab, and then they get this 24-hour cycle of your hormones, just versus a blood draw, which is just what's happening in that moment, and 2 hours later it could be different. So hormone replacement therapy is great, I believe, and also the endocrine glands that I've been so fond of, right? We've got to support them. So we've got to help the adrenals, we've got to help the pituitary, and we've got to help the ovaries. And we can use what we call, oh shoot, I'm forgetting the name of them right now. They're glandular extracts. So you can actually take ovary in glandular extract form, and we can take pituitary and glandular extract. I use a company called Mountain Health Products in Colorado. I know their phone number by heart, 800-647-0074. They carry the glandular extracts, and they have some great women's herbal formulas that have like 𝗥𝗲𝗰liche, Angelica, yarrow. All of these plants have what they call phytoestrogens, which are plant-based estrogens in them. So there's a lot to menopause. There's a lot. And also you need liver support, because believe it or not, the liver has to break down estrogen and progesterone. And if your liver's sluggish, which it could be, you want that your liver to be functioning stronger. So menopause has a few elements to it: the glandular extracts, the bioidentical hormones, and keeping your liver flushing well.
Okay, last question. I apologize if I didn't get to your question. The detox kit, is it safe for children?
It is safe for children, yes.
Okay.
It's very safe for children.
Okay.
And,
well, yeah, go ahead.
And the elderly, and the very elderly too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Eric, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, thank you. Katina, awesome job. Thank you. Just a reminder, the detox protocol will be on our website, palyme.org, within a day or two. So go there to look at it. We're not going to have a virtual Lyme Impact speaker in August. We're going to restart up in September. So Tuesday, September 21st. We have gotten an awful lot of requests to get some training and education on neuroplasticity, retraining the brain, doing work that can really not go after the symptoms, but really goes after the functioning and retraining of the brain. So a lot of those conditions are really related to chronic stress, the limbic system impairment, a lot of symptoms like chronic fatigue, multiple chemical sensitivity, fibromyalgia, certainly Lyme disease, anxiety, and a lot of other different types of ailments. A root cause to a large degree of a lot of them is chronic stress. So there is a program that is called Dynamic Neuro Retraining Systems. If you go out on the website and just Google retraining the brain, DNRS, the site is retrainingthebrain.com. The system goes by the acronym DNRS, Dynamic Neuro Retraining Systems. We have a speaker, one of their senior people are going to be talking about how you can actually improve your brain as you get older, given that a lot of us are affected by certainly a number of these symptoms. So with that, again, Katina, thank you very much. Enjoy August. Bill, thank you for everything that you do, and we'll call it an evening. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.